Joey Logano locked himself into the NASCAR Cup Series championship race at Phoenix later this year with a victory at Las Vegas Motor Speedway this past weekend. And has caused quite a bit of controversy, with many people pointing to the absolute failure of the NASCAR Cup Series playoff system, given that Logano, if it was in a traditional point system, he would be in 15th place, pointing to the fact that he has had a mediocre season. However, his competitor, Chase Elliott, had some thoughts on that, and he says, don't hate Logano and the number 22 team for working the system the way it has been implemented. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at John Trent Racing. I wrote this up over at stockcarreport.com. You can find the link in the description below. Chase Elliott was asked about Joey Logano's win and the controversy that is surrounded. And there has been quite a bit of controversy surrounded. If you've been following it on social media at all, you can see people are pointing to the fact that this playoff format is absolutely terrible. You've got this guy right here saying, if Joey Logano, a driver with 10 top 10s and an average finish of 18th, wins this title, that is the biggest alarm to abolish this format. It's been apparent for years, and that should be the final straw. So much of the commentary isn't really directed at Joey Logano. It's directed at NASCAR and the playoff format in general. We even had this guy here, Alexander, responding to Bob Pockrass, positing that Logano is worthy of a championship given he has 3 wins this season. And Alexander says, I'm sorry, he's 15th. It's not hating the player, it's hating the game. The player just happens to be yet another good example of the game's severe flaws. You're right, the game has changed, but it has changed for the worse in every aspect. So again, most of the criticism is obviously directed at NASCAR's playoff system. And nevertheless, Chase Elliott was asked to give his thoughts on the matter in an interview with Matt Weaver. This is what he said. He says, it's not Joey's fault that the format is what it is. I look at those guys and the job that they did this last weekend. They took a chance, and regardless of how they got in, that was irrelevant to them. They were in. They took a chance, and it worked out for them. I think while everyone can have mixed emotions or feel this or that or whatever, this is the format. Who are we or anybody else to blame for doing their jobs, for them doing their jobs and punching their ticket? That's not their fault. And I think it's silly of us to take that away from them in any right, because that's what it is. I can't change that. And I think he's absolutely right here. This is the format that they were given, and that's what they have to operate with. And Logano's team obviously took advantage of that. Win and you're in. And they did a gutsy fuel saving strategy, and it worked out, and they were able to steal a win from Christopher Bell and notch their ticket to the NASCAR Cup championship race at Phoenix. He played it perfectly, and he was able to work his way in. Obviously, you can point to the fact that there was a DQ last weekend, which allowed Logano to get in, etc. But he still was there on the cusp to take advantage of that DQ, and Bowman was DQ'd for good reason. He was light at the scales. You're light at the scales, you get DQ'd. Anyways, he was there. He worked the playoff system. He got his ticket punched in. Can't really disagree with what Chase is saying. That is the format that is given to them, and he played it that way. However, he says that he doesn't actually like the format. He says, I don't necessarily love the format personally. I certainly benefited from a good streak in 20 that carried us through Phoenix. I'm proud of that for sure. It's a different time nowadays, and this is the format you have to work with, and those guys capitalized on it. He concluded saying, don't hate them. So I pretty much agree with what Chase is saying. Obviously, he's just kind of pointing to the fact that Logano and his Penske team were able to capitalize on the format, but he says that he doesn't actually like the format. I think if they're going to keep a playoff-style format, I think they need to go back to what they originally did with the Chase, where you have maybe 10, 15 cars over a 10 or 7 to 10 race format. And that's what you go. And you take the best one who performs in those 7 to 10 races becomes the champion. I think that would probably be the best. That's something what the Lucas Oil Late Model Dirt Series, I think, did pretty well here. Unfortunately, we didn't actually get those 7 races because they had rainouts at East Bay and at Atomic. But I do think that makes it for an interesting aspect if you want to keep that playoff format. I really, really do not like the whole, we have Final Four, whoever does the best in the last race kind of wins it. I really don't like that at all for crowning a champion. I know that's more like football in the NFL with the Super Bowl, where you have one game and the winner wins. But I personally like to see those 7-game sets where you're looking at baseball, you're looking at hockey, you're looking at the NBA. I think that is where NASCAR needs to kind of follow in those steps. And I think the chase kind of does that. Obviously, there was probably reasons why they moved away from the chase, but I think that is probably what you would want to go back to if you want to keep the playoff format, which I think NASCAR does. However, if I had my druthers, I would just have it just straight up points race for the end of the season. I think that you can have great battles for those championships. You see that in the Cars Tour year after year. You're seeing really close championship battles where it comes down to the last race to determine who is going to win. We saw Brendan Butterbean Queen able to beat out Connor Hall this year. Carson Quaffle was able to beat Butterbean the year before. And it looks like that trend is likely going to continue because the competition level is so high. And it's very similar, I think, with the NASCAR Cup Series. Obviously, Kyle Larson has had a standout year, and you'll have drivers that do that. But I think for the most part, you would see a pretty competitive series where it would come down to the last 1 or 2 races to determine who would be the champion. So I think if you really want to go back or you really want to change it up, that's where I would go back to. But I think even if you want to keep kind of the playoff format, I think you go back to the chase. I really hate the kind of one race championship format. And then whoever does the best in that race wins. I don't like that at all. I get that is how they do it in the Super Bowl. You play your one game, you move on. That's how the NFL does it. But I much rather prefer best of 7, right? And I think NASCAR is better to kind of model themselves off of that with the chase format. But let me know what you guys make of what Chase Elliott had to say here. Obviously, him not liking the current system that is in place. And then obviously noting that Logano and his team really shouldn't get any kind of hate or anything like that because they played the system to how it is built. Let me know in the comments below.